All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I think there's a couple more folks who will be slowly trickling in, but we do have a quorum, so we'll begin. It's 4 o'clock on Wednesday, May 8th. Welcome to the Regional Housing Council meeting. As always, why don't we go ahead and get started with introductions? Why don't we go ahead and start with you, Councilmember Madrone? Would you mind introducing some of the Olympia contingent?
But you want me to introduce the whole contingent?
Well, I don't know. We usually go around and say your name and position and yeah.
And you want me to introduce everyone who's here from Olympia? So Danny Madrone with the Olympia City Council, and I see that I've got my alternate Robert Vanderpool with the City Council, and I see Rich Hoy and Jacinda Stelgis. And I actually don't know if there's somebody else from Olympia in the room with you.
I think that covers it.
Okay.
All righty, Carolyn, you want to go ahead?
Hi, yes, Carolyn Cox representing City of Lacey. And we have here Ryan Andrews, our planning manager. And who else? Jennifer, I'm sorry. My pupils are dilated and I'm not seeing very well. Jennifer Adams, our housing coordinator.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I don't see any representatives from Yelm here quite yet, so we might have to come back to them. And Commissioner Klaus, I think, is joining us shortly.
Yeah, I spoke to her. She's on the way to the report. So.
Mejia, would you mind?
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Carolina Mejia, and I'm the alternate for the county. And with us, we have Assistant County Manager Rob Gelder, and we have Tom Webster, we have Keely Marino, we have Alex Pierce, and we also have Leah Tange. And Ellen, who's sorry, I had it on my head to name you, and then I just blinked.
It's like my third week. Alan Hershey, executive agent.
Welcome. And for Tumwater, I'm joined by Councilmember Joan Cathy, as well as Brad Medrew from our planning department. So why don't we go ahead? Are there any staff changes to the agenda before we sort of jump into things?
No, I will say, Councilmember Palmer will be able to just join as we're promoting him to panelist.
Oh, great.
Also, Chair Althauser.
Yeah.
We also have members from the advisory boards. We have one of our chairs of the Homeless Services Advisory Board on there. Caven Hill.
Fernand, Caven Hill, they, them, Homeless Services Advisory Board co-chair.
Thank you. Welcome, Kate.
And from the Affordable Housing Board.
Oh.
No, not yet. Nominee.
We'll introduce Mary Lynn.
All right, thank you for that. I don't think there's any changes to the agenda, so just moving right ahead to some of our items of business. The first is approval of the meeting minutes from our April 24th meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as they were presented?
I move to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll second.
Motion by
Councilman Palmer.
Palmer, and then was that seconded by Councilmember Madrone?
Yeah, sure was.
All righty. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. That then brings us to public comment. Don't believe we have anyone registered online, correct? I don't know if we have any public comment here in the chamber, but don't believe we do, so we can dispense with that and move right into our substantive agenda. So the first item we have is the price letter, the Preservation and Reinvestment Initiative for Community Enhancement Notice of Funding Opportunity. About the letter of support, Darian is listed for this action item, but I think, Tom, you're going to help us walk through this.
Yeah, Darian can make it, and Rich, I may call on you to help as well. So you'll recall at our last meeting, Darian presented the background on the price. Also, this is an application to the Department of Housing and Urban Development requesting funding to create a new manufactured home community. And we asked the RHC to provide a letter of support in support of that application. So in your packet is a draft letter. At this point, I know there's some additional information that City of Olympia is looking to gather around the specifics of the project. And last time we talked, we weren't quite ready to add those, and I don't know, Rich, if I can ask you if there's any updates from the City of Olympia regarding the project that we can add to this letter at this time, or do we need to wait a little bit longer before we can provide those details?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, we're gonna need to continue to wait a little bit longer.
All right, so in front of you is a draft letter. What I would ask is that if you could approve this letter with kind of approval to add additional details, specifics about the project as they become available for the application is required. There wasn't an extension for the deadline HUD provided, so the application was going to be due in early June. It is now later in June, so it brought us about 20 extra days or so to submit that application, so that's beneficial. So happy to answer any questions that I can. Sorry, before that, we also talked last time about having the manufactured home work group provide a separate letter. After some internal discussions, we decided that just felt kind of awkward. We tried to incorporate into the letter some information about what that group is doing to capture that the RHC is proactively working on manufactured home community issues. So we incorporated that into this letter, but there won't be a separate letter from the manufactured home work group.
Councilmember Hugh.
I think.
Commissioner, sorry. Not used to that still.
You can just call me Carol.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom. The letter, I think looks great. And I'm wondering, since the extension for the deadline has been extended, when is it that the City of Olympia is requesting letters of support from the jurisdictions?
Yeah, and so I don't know the deadline, so and I don't know, Jacinda is on here as well, working on the NOFO. I don't have the timeline in front of me, but it would be by kind of later in May. And we can get you an exact date on that, unless Jacinda, you know what that date is. Because we'll need to put out that application, or Olympia will need to submit that application for public comment for a 15-day period. They'll hold a public hearing in early June. So I kind of late May, but I don't know, Jacinda, if you have a specific date for that.
Tom, I'm sorry, I don't have a specific date. I can try to follow up with Anna, Anastasia Everett, and see if we can get that to you by the end of the meeting here today.
This is Rich. I think that we're looking at holding our public hearing on June 4th. So we would need to have the information available backed up from that date. So that, yeah, latter part of May.
Are there any other questions about this? I think sort of the ask is, not only is this letter acceptable now, but are you comfortable with us making a few small additions to add more specifics without having to bring that back for a meeting so we can accommodate, or a vote so we can accommodate that timeline? Seeing a thumbs up from Carolyn about that, and from Danny and Trevor. Do we need a motion to actually approve this? Looking at staff, I'm not certain. I don't think we actually do.
Yeah, I think if, as long as we have, so we will then provide the final
Yeah.
draft to Councilmember Chair Althauser to sign the document. So as long as you feel comfortable with the thumbs up to go ahead and sign that.
That sounds good. And for our part, for Tumwater, I'll be working with our mayor to also do a letter of support as well that can also be considered as part of the packet. Great. I think that, Danny? I'm just gonna use first names. Is that okay with people? I keep tripping over titles.
First names is preferred for me.
Great.
I just raised my hand to say thank you to everyone for supporting Olympia in this funding request. It means a lot.
Absolutely. So that takes us to the next item on our agenda, the Homeless Services Advisory Board funding recommendations.
Excellent,
Stephen,
thank you.
You're gonna help us walk through these.
Yeah, so again, a consolidated RFP was sent out in February using the HB 5386, formerly known as the HB 2163 for cold and weather hazardous contracts. The Homeless Services Advisory Board went over these funding requests for 1 year, starting July 1st, ending June 30th, as all contracts for hazardous weather are 1 year. Here you see the spending breakdown there for Olympia Mutual Aid Partners, 44,450, Interfaith Works, 44,450, and Family Support Center, 248. 666 for a total of $337,766. The Homeless Services Advisory Board voted unanimously on the funding recommendations presented here, and we're just asking that the RHC approve those as submitted.
Great, go ahead.
One thing I'll add, and we'll get into this in the renewal conversation, is that the amounts that you see are above what they received last year. And that amount that is above the awards last year is due to the $2.2 million coming from Commerce in the last 3 weeks. And so I will be addressing that with the renewal conversation.
Okay. Trevor?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, and I'm pretty sure we're good to go on this, but this is, we already have the funding for this, correct? Or we're in the process of asking for the funding, at least from the state and county.
Correct, yes.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on where we were at with it. So, all right, thank you.
Yeah, and just to clarify, these are contracts funded with local document recording fees. So this is money we collect throughout the year. So we don't require a contract with the state for these funds. These are funds that we've collected or will collect during this calendar year.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Alan, did I see you?
My question was answered.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Danny?
Yeah, Trevor's questions making me wonder, like when I first came onto the RHC a few years ago, Tom, I think it was you that sent me like this spreadsheet that showed all the different types of funding that we make recommendations on and what it goes to. And, you know, Trevor, if you haven't seen that yet, if somebody could get that over to him so that you can kind of have a sense of, you know, where the funding comes from and what it is like, how the consolidated funding process works here, that might be helpful to like, you know, just to kind of orient you to the space that we're working in here.
Yeah, no, that'd be perfect. I'd appreciate that.
Yep, we'll definitely, I'll send that over to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or feedback? Seeing none on this one, would entertain a motion to approve recommendations from the Homeless Service Advisory Board for cold and hazardous weather contracts from the 2024-2025 consolidated RFP.
Move approval.
Motion from Danny, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Trevor.
We'll
There's a
tag
motion
team,
and
okay?
Danny,
Motion all right, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. That brings us to the next item on our agenda, the Homeless Service Advisory Board funding recommendations for renewals. Keely, I think you'll help us with this one.
Absolutely. So these are the second year awards for the projects that were awarded in last year's RFP consolidated funding process. There's a couple of things about this that I believe we've spoken to you before in January around the 17,000 extra that we had in Human Services Fund that we agreed, or you agreed as Regional Housing Council, to approve proportionately distributing that extra $17,000 into existing Human Services Fund contracts. And likewise, we had some extra local home fund dollars in this year to the tune of $198,000, and it was discussed and recommended from the Homeless Services Advisory Board in January to the RHC to award those extra funds proportionate to the awards for the eviction prevention rent assistance programs. So just putting that out there, that's one of the changes that has happened in this renewal process. So again, just to go over the funding sources that were used for all of these awards is the Consolidated Homeless Grant, which is comes from the state. Housing and Essential Needs, which is a pot of Consolidated Homeless Grant funds specific to that program, can be used for coordinated entry. The Human Services Fund, which is a local sales tax. Local Home Fund, which is our home fund that we passed in 2021 or 2022, I can't remember the year. And then this House Bill 5386 is what was formerly called House Bill 2163, also House Bill 1277 in 2021 or in 2022 legislative session. They voted to combine all the document reporting fees into one single document reporting fee. And so that you will now, from this point forward, be seeing 5386 instead of 2163. And then finally, another new funding source that came to us in 2023, which is the Emergency Housing Fund, created to fill those gaps in document reporting fee revenues last year. Subsequent to that, last year, the Department of Commerce also granted to the counties across the state the Consolidated Homeless Grant Inflationary Funds. So these funds were specific to stabilizing the workforce. So they could be whatever we determined that looks like for our grantees. And we went through a process, vetted that with our providers, and created some criteria for agencies to apply for a certain number of funds based on their FTEs, total FTEs that met certain criteria. So those are what those funds are for. Those are also up for renewal, although we didn't award those until October because they came late, and then also we had to finalize our process. So those are all the funding sources that we're utilizing to pay this. On top of what we had to meet our awards that were from last year, we had, as I said before, about 2,493,215 additional funds, which we were just alerted to about 3 or so weeks ago, to be added to our contracts for this upcoming fiscal year. And so what we did after a process of coming up with some options and working through some of those in our office, it was determined that we would apply a roughly 22 to 23% increase to all contracts from last year outside of the Human Services Fund, because that is a separate fund not coming from the state, and the Housing and Essential Needs Program, because the Housing and Essential Needs is a very specific funding source for a very specific program with different criteria. So you'll see it reflected in the numbers, that increase from the awards recommended last year. That is the reason why. Bless you. Yes, so moving through the worksheet, you're going to see. I'm sorry, page 9. You just moved and approved these recommendations. You can see. Oh, that's fine. Here. Page 9. Yes, please. Thank you. There you can see what was awarded in 2023. At the time of moving to approve or making recommendations for awards, for the Homeless Services Advisory Board did not know, nor did staff, that we would be getting 2.2 million extra dollars. So they had made a decision to just fund them at the level they were at last year, assuming that we would only have that amount to award out. So you can see that the awards requested, they're the 207, the 35, the 46, and a unilateral 23% increase on those projects. So just kind of spelling it out so you can see what that looks like compared to 2023. All right, I'm ready. These are the projects for the Human Services Fund with that proportionate increase of funds out of that 17,000 extra that we received. So you can see that that percentage or that bump in the right-hand column for award recommendations. So these are basic needs. These are programs and projects that aren't really eligible to go for some of our other homeless services funds because they're literally items, or they are supporting projects like the community kitchen, providing survival gear, providing the food bank. So food and other essential needs that our providers might not need some supplemental funds to cover all of their expenses and their other programs. It's a very specific pot of money. Yeah.
Okay, if I answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could we go to the severe weather? So there, the 2024 award goes up, and you talked about sort of the additional amount.
Mhm.
But yet the only one for the mutual aid partners,
Mhm.
compared to what they requested, actually was less than. Was that just a match?
Yeah, so instead of anticipating some questions about process and procedure, we thought we're just going to do a just down the line percentage increase for every contract. So that's the only reason why they received less than what they asked for. They were going to receive 35,000 until we got the 2.2 million to add to it. So it was just a matter of equally distributing it and not picking certain programs out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's for hazardous weather. Yeah, like 3 days.
Yeah.
72 hours. Okay, I think we're good unless anyone has questions about Human Services Fund.
I just have a question kind of broadly about this whole thing.
Mhm.
Which is do we expect this to be a one-time increase that the next time we get a funding award will be $0.4 million less than what it is right now? Or do we sort of expect this to be the baseline?
It's really hard to say with the, I know that there's Commerce and OMB really were trying to gather as much information about what kind of gaps we would be experiencing this year based on document reporting fee revenue. And we have a new administration coming in, depending on how they are going to approach homeless services. So we have a administration that's very favorable to these initiatives coming out of the Department of Commerce. So it could be that it is maintained. I know that it's always advocated to increase. So it's hard to say.
Okay.
Whatever we've been given so far has maintained year to year outside of the document reporting fees because they're dependent.
So just as a clarification, this funding can be only used basically to cover the gap of the recording fee that we're seeing throughout. It can't be used for anything new.
Technically, yes, there could be a decision made that we're going to go out for an RFP for the extra $2.2 million. We're not required to attach it to existing programs. However, we wanted to avoid another RFP process, and these programs definitely could always use a boost. So I know that this morning we had let the housing action team know, which is mostly providers, that these recommendations were going to go in front of the REC today, and they were incredibly excited about the prospect of getting more funds. And then it's also in alignment with the state plan to address homelessness. That draft of the state plan has an entire objective out of 5 to stabilize the workforce, to come up with strategies in our local plan and at the state to address for inflation, to be able to pay higher wages to keep the workforce in place rather than for it to be how it's been for the last several years, just really sparse and stressful. And to best practice, consistency of staff is really key in successful outcomes. So
Perhaps manage expectations going.
yeah.
Contracting, it's like got a bump, but There's no guarantees.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So the increases, like the net increases, like 23% is more than inflation has increased since 2023.
Right.
Isn't it also the case that the 2023 awards themselves, it's not like those met the need,
Correct.
right? Like those were originally, the requests for those were significantly higher than what was awarded in 2023. So we're really, by conducting this increase, getting closer to what was originally requested a year and a half ago-ish.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would also say that one of the things that we're implementing this year into our contracts are more specific performance measures. So I think that we'll be able to get a really good baseline this year based on those performance measures. And also be able to hopefully reflect how this funding shifted all the things, the deliverables on their programs.
Brad?
Just to let you know, some of you are cutting out. I hear Keely consistently and Michael consistently, but there are others that sort of cut in and out that I can't always hear.
Me.
Well, it might be,
wow.
yeah, it might be you're a little further away from the mic.
I just was.
Oh. You don't have to stop talking. You can come closer if you like. We have space.
The other thing
Thank you for pointing that out, Brad.
And the other thing I'll point out is that a lot of times agencies have applied for funding based on what they kind of expect. But they are providing rental assistance, or they're providing kind of hotel space, for hazardous weather. Family support provides hotel rooms for people during cold weather. So this funding will allow them to support more families, more individuals will be allowed to be supported with this. So just because they might not have requested more funding initially because they didn't think there was more funding available, doesn't mean they won't be able to serve more people.
So if you're going to see down the line, these are the same contracts that were approved last year, the same projects, the same programs. The only thing that will stand out for you is the eviction prevention rent assistance program. And again, those are going to be higher than a higher increase than the other programs due to the extra funds from the local home fund. And yeah, the extra funds from the local home fund. The end. Yes. Otherwise, that's going to be a unilateral 22 to 23% increase on all of these contracts.
All right. Does anyone have any questions? Can open up the floor. And so for the increase, the board voted on this too in the same process they did with hazardous weather.
They did.
And this was also unanimous.
Correct.
The advisory board.
Yes.
The other thing, if I can point out, and it's less important for this group, but it may be important for providers to know, is we are moving to have all of our contracts go from a July 1 to June 30 period of performance. Previously, some of our local funds were in a September 1 to August 31st timeframe. And they became complicated when we're kind of now, we've got so many fund sources to mix them. And so we're moving to a consistent program year for our homeless services. So everything moving forward will be on the July 1 to June 30th program year. Our affordable housing, which we'll talk about in a minute, will remain on a September 1 to August 31st program year, because that's in line with our HUD, our federal program year for HUD, and that's more complicated to change. So I just wanted to point that out.
Great. Well, I just want to offer my thanks to staff for being able to pivot so quickly to be able to take advantage of this great news, right? This is the best problem we could have.
Yeah.
So it's I'm really pleased that we're able to pivot and award this pretty equally across the board so that we can provide more support, help more people, stabilize our programs. Are there
Here. I just second that.
Well, if there's no other questions or discussion, I would entertain a motion that we approve recommendations from the Homeless Services Advisory Board for contract renewals and award amounts for projects funded under the 2023-2024 consolidated RFP.
Second.
Who had the motion?
I think you need to move, Carolyn,
Oh, okay, so
Somebody else can
moved. How
second.
about that?
and I'll second.
All
Okay.
right.
Motion by Carolyn and seconded by Danny. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those
Aye.
opposed? The motion passes unanimously. That I think now brings us to the 7th item on our agenda, the Affordable Housing Advisory Board funding recommendations for new contracts.
I will take that. Grace,
All right.
able to join us. But before I start, Jacinda got in contact with Anastasia Everett from the city of Olympia, and she said June 18th is the deadline for the letters.
Okay. But we need to have that's like the deadline for everything to be
Yes.
submitted. We need to have them to Olympia in advance of that,
Interesting. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the final. Okay, got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Grace is not here. She's the chair of our advisory board, so I will take over as the staff liaison. Jacinda is also online and can chime in whenever she needs to. All right, so similar to the Homeless Services Advisory Board, we also had our consolidated request for proposals released. That was released February 23rd. Applications were due April 5th. We had a total of $7,318,401 in funding from the fund sources of the local HUM fund, both county and Olympia together, House Bill 1406, and then the 5386 fund, which Keely discussed earlier. Also our Home American Rescue Plan Act, which are one-time funds, and then the Home Investment Partnership Act, which is our regular home allocation. In total, we had 10 applications submitted, which requested approximately $8.9 million in funding. Staff determined that all these applications were eligible. So the Thurston Affordable Housing Advisory Board reviewed all 10 and scored them. They then met on April 25th to make recommendations. 2 advisory board members that were associated with organizations submitted applications, so they were not present, but they did score other applications that were not their own. What I'm going to present to you today in this exhibit B on page 17 and beyond, you can see all the applications. It's a spreadsheet of the applications that were received. Their funding request, target population, and just a summary of kind of what the projects were so that you could see exactly what projects are being funded. At that meeting, there were a few points of discussion that are listed in your staff report. That is, the board chose to fully fund the Lehigh Franz Anderson Permanent Supportive Housing Project because of the other substantial local leverage in the project, and in hopes that will increase its competitiveness in this upcoming Housing Trust Fund and LIHTC funding rounds, which will occur later this year. They also recommend fully funding 3 of the 4 Homes First projects due to the modest size of their request and the board's desire to support preservation of existing low mod income rental housing. The board also discussed fully funding both of the South Puget Sound Habitat for Humanity projects, which are the Yelm Longmire project and the Toluchan Townhomes project, as those have been identified as priority projects in our region. And they're also providing the affordable home owner units. The board also discussed partially funding the Vital Housing LLC courtside apartment, contingent upon the agency providing additional documentation of their agency history and capacity. The group believed that it was important to assist in the acquisition and preservation of these affordable rental units, which I believe it's 211 units that are going to be up for fill, and if not acquired before the LURA expires, may potentially go to market rate housing. So they're very interested in preserving those as affordable rental units. However, they did have some remaining questions after reviewing the application that they would just like more information from the applicant. This chart that is on page 16, this is the chart of the funding recommendations themselves. As you can see, mostly everything was funded at its full ask, with the exception of the Homes First Hayes accessory dwelling units pre-development costs. They chose not to fund that activity. And then you'll see the partial recommendation for Vital Housing. I will also note that since we emailed this packet out, we received our final allocation from HUD on our home investment partnership, so our final dollar. amount so that we had to award. So we have adjusted that. The board did decide that depending on if we received more or less money than we had anticipated, that money would go to or come from the Vital Housing Project. So this table that's in the printed packet today does have this on the screen is the updated number with the actual home investment partnership funding amount. And if Tom or Jacinda have anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is a reminder that there was approximately 8.8 million available for funding, but there was a recommendation that this board to set aside 20% for an opportunity fund, which is about $1.6 million that will go on an opportunity fund for, over the course of the next year, whether that's a mobile home community or another acquisition project becomes available. That is still available. So there is approximately 1.6 available through an opportunity fund that we've, the Affordable Housing Board talked about before and supported.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I'm wondering in regards to Vital Housing, they don't sound familiar to me. So I'm wondering, have they done projects before in Thurston County that we know about? And
They have not done projects before in Thurston County that we know about. Jacinda might be able to speak a little bit more to. She's available. Can't see it.
Hi, sorry, y'all are very small on my screen. That sounded like maybe that was Carolina though that asked the question.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, they haven't done, Vital Housing hasn't done a lot in our community, but they are partnering with some staff that used to work with Shelter Resources who has done some work in our community, and I think are actually listening in as well. So they are somewhat new to Thurston County, and I think that is part of the reason that our board just wanted to know a little bit more about them.
And the board hasn't heard back with the sort of due diligence that they were requesting yet.
We have not made the ask yet. We were waiting to bring this to the board to you all today.
So technically, the Affordable Housing Advisory Board is setting aside a potential investment of $1.27 million, but the ask before us here is for the rest of the slate because they haven't recommended $1.2 million yet because they're waiting on they want to reach out to due diligence and get more due diligence if we agree that that's necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's correct. So yeah, there wouldn't be a formal approval of this board of that because we're still waiting for that additional information. Wanted to provide that information. If this board had any concerns at this point or additional any input around that Vital Housing project, we'd certainly kind of take that back to the board. But wanted to kind of give you that heads up. This is where the board is leaning, but requesting because it is a relatively new organization. And my understanding, Jacinda, correct me if I'm wrong, is it's in some ways an LLC of combining some existing groups of people who are coming together to form this group. So asking for a little bit more background on this group before we feel comfortable moving forward.
Okay. And in the event that the board does not feel comfortable with that extra 1.2 million could just go into the opportunity fund.
Right. And also an opportunity to revisit the Homes First project that wasn't.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm wondering with the request, so this is one of the only ones where it's not that's partially funded. Was this something where they're able to make that gap with the rest of the funding? Is that something that they provided in the application that if we were to not do the full request, they could find the funding elsewhere, or are they applying for grants or other resources?
Jacinda, do you remember the specifics of the application?
Sorry, y'all. Hard time finding the unmute. I don't. I can search my files and see if I can pull it up very quickly. There wasn't a minimum funding request identified in this application, in any of the applications in the consolidated grant that went out. So in terms of, like, would they be able to make up that amount that we are not funding them? I mean, there are other resources they could go after. I'm unsure at this point if they would choose to do that or not.
Danny?
Yeah, well, my first question was already asked in terms of like, can they make up that gap? But I appreciate that we're doing due diligence with them and just asking for a little bit more background information. I mean, could we also ask if their project is still feasible with this amount? Should we decide to make that recommendation?
Yes, we can ask them that.
Yeah, that would make sense to me. To just, if we're already reaching out to them, asking them additional questions, to throw that one in there.
Yes, that's great. Thank you, Danny.
Great. Trevor?
Well, I was gonna say, unless anybody has more questions, I was gonna make a motion.
I actually have one more question. And then I'd love to entertain a motion. For the Homes First that wasn't funded, can you summarize some of the discussion? Or
Yes.
why they came to that conclusion?
Yes, so the Homes First project that was not funded was the Hayes. I'm looking for it. I'm sorry. It was, oh, here we go. It is the pre-development costs they were looking for. So I believe it was, I can't remember exactly which pre-development costs they had laid out, but I believe the discussion was the risk of, if for some reason the project does not come together and there are not affordable housing units at the end of the contract, or at the end of they're just running a risk that they would have to essentially pay that money back. Or I think that the board felt like there was enough need elsewhere to fully fund the other projects without taking that additional risk.
Makes sense.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, our funds are going to pay for units. And so we need to see units at the end of the day. So if they're paying for an architecture and engineering design, and they make a determination, oh, that project can't go forward, we would require them to pay those funds because there's no units at the end of the day. And so and it's really hard for agencies to get those pre-development costs, but there's also a real risk. And so that was just that discussion.
And by not, to go back to vital housing, I have one more question pop up. So if we don't take action on that today, are there any timing implications for funds? Like if this is kind of an amalgamation of different funding sources that have different timelines, does that create any complications? If, then we would have more time for the Affordable Housing Board to get their due diligence, to then send us a recommendation, then we'd approve it maybe at the end of June, depending on what they say.
Yeah, this is not a time-sensitive project.
Okay.
They really have until, I believe, 2026 when this property is actually going to come on the market. So they have time to kind of obtain that other financing. So that, yeah, there's not a time sensitivity with this project.
Okay. Great. Are there any other questions? Anyone here in Zoom land? If not, we would entertain a motion to approve the recommendations from the Affordable Housing Advisory Board for capital projects from spring 2024 RFP, with exception of the vital housing thing as we discussed previously.
And I so move.
Second.
I saw a motion from Trevor, and I think Emily, was that a second from?
Yeah, that was a second.
Okay, got it. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thanks so much. And that, I think, takes us to our advisory boards and appointing some new members.
All right, that's me again. Thank you. So the Thurston Affordable Housing Advisory Board and the Homeless Services Advisory Board both have current board membership vacancies. I know that we recently came to you all asking you to approve other members. We since have other vacancies that we look to fill, so we went back to that original applicant pool and interviewed some applicants who we had not interviewed before, with the exception of one, which Keely can speak to. So we conducted interviews on April 29th, and so we are bringing you 4 new requests for additional members to these boards today. You want to speak to?
Oh, sure. So one recommended new board member for the Homeless Services Advisory Board is a member of the Lived Experience Housing Steering Committee, of which there are 2 seats that are set aside for the members of that committee on the board, and 1 member stepped down since the beginning of the recruitment process. So we had a seat to fill, and this was a person who had applied and had interviewed on the first round. So we just checked in with her. She definitely was still interested. And so that's who, she was not interviewed through this process, but never.
Okay, so then the Homeless Services Advisory Board has 1 additional member that they are recommending. And then the Affordable Housing Advisory Board has 2 members that we are recommending. The 2 members that we're recommending today are Mary Ellis Mraz, who is here present with us. And Mary works as a housing stability specialist for the Housing Authority of Thurston County. She's also a Lacey resident. And then we're also recommending Tiffany Walker, who is a Lacey resident and works as the Family Resource and Prevention Program Manager for Family Support Center of South Sound.
And the Homeless Services Advisory Board is recommending today to appoint Jaron Marks, who is a resident of Tumwater. So we have Tumwater representation, and currently works as the Coordinated Entry Specialist with Family Support Center from South Sound. And then Heidi Barrientos, who is the member of the Lived Experience Housing Steering Committee.
So we're just here today to ask you to appoint both Mary, Tiffany, Jaron, and Heidi to the Affordable Housing and Homeless Services Board.
Great. Are there any?
Yeah, I move to approve recommendations for the new Thurston Affordable Housing Advisory Board and the Homeless Services Advisory Board members.
All right, is there a second?
Second. Beat ya.
Yeah, I think had it by just a smidge, Carolyn. So there's a motion by Trevor and seconded by Danny. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes unanimously. And Mary, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to say a couple words, or if not, that's totally cool, but welcome. We're really pleased to have you on board, and great, wonderful.
Lesson learned, no lemonade meetings.
All right, very good. Thank you, welcome. Well, that sort of brings us to the tail end for good of the order, where we can just open it up for folks. Anyone, not just members of the REC, but if folks have good of the order to share, feel free to jump in or raise your hands before we get to the conclusion of the meeting. Well, I will go ahead and kick things off. We do have a couple items to mention. We approved our CDBG funding applications yesterday at council. It got a little hairy. We got it done. And I'm really excited we were able to do that. We were lamenting during the motion, it's such a challenging process that in one sense, we're relieved that we don't have to do it for another 3 years, but in another sense, I wish we had to do it every year so that we're on the 3-year rotation. I wish we had the opportunity to get those funds out of the community annually. But we are also with the city as part of our housing element and code update work. We'll be hosting a housing open house at City Hall on May 29th, 2024. And there's also an online component for people who can't make it to City Hall. They'll be able to visit our website and watch a recording as well. And Brad, would you mind talking about some of the stakeholdering work we're doing for that as well, if I could put you on the spot?
Yes, so as part of our preparation, because we have pretty extensive state requirements for updating our housing element and associated development codes by the end of next year. And also we want to take advantage of the opportunity to do more in terms of maintaining building relationships, dealing with affordable housing and homelessness. on the broader sense beyond just the comprehensive plan cycle. We have been reaching out to various groups and organizations that we've identified as potential housing stakeholders in our community. We have a list of more than 25 different organizations that we've reached out to. We've had the opportunity to sit down and meet with about 13 of those. That ranges from folks who are interested in actually developing new housing that could be for-profit builders, the Olympia Master Builders, et cetera, Chamber of Commerce. And then also and nonprofits, we've also been talking with them, but we're also talking with the service providers. Everything from these food bank satellites who are in the city to the school district and together and other organizations trying to get a handle on the sort of the broader picture of the housing. And what we're trying to do also is use those conversations to sort of guide our development of the open house that we're going to be having at the end of this month. So we've been pretty successful for the most part in talking with, say, landlords, renters, manufactured home park residents, and so forth. What we have not been able to do as much is talk with all the different groups in the city that are that we needed to be talking to about racial inequities and so forth. So that's been a difficulty for us, and it's a challenge that we're going to have continuing until we actually have the ability to have those conversations.
Thank you. Danny?
Yeah, I can give a quick update. Olympia has been working on the Capitol Mall Triangle sub area plan for a while now. So, where Capitol Mall is at, there's a lot of, retail. There's actually very, very few housing units in the space that we're looking at for a sub area plan, but we have a goal for a lot more housing units. I don't have the number on the top of my head, but it is going to be reviewed by the Land Use and Environment Committee tomorrow evening. And we're looking at ways that we could address some of the development code, such as commercial parking requirements. I don't know how often y'all go to the mall in Olympia, but there's often a lot of very empty parking spaces. So we're looking at ways that we can change around some of the development code and try to make it possible to build housing in that area. One component of the plan is looking at a pretty significant density bonus for affordable housing that's built there. And we've already expanded the multifamily tax exemption into that area. So I'll give another update on that once it makes its way through council so that you all can know the outcomes of that. And at our last meeting, I did promise to send along the recent tenant protections that we did, and I did that 10 minutes before this meeting started, so it should be in your inboxes.
Awesome, thank you. Trevor?
Yeah, I had a question for Danny, actually. For the around the mall there, are you looking at doing like the first floor residential kind of setup with units up above, or is it going to be all housing units? Because we're kind of
commercial on the bottom.
I'm sorry, first floor commercial. Yeah, and then
I believe so. I'm still making my way through the plan. I see Robert nodding there. That is kind of like the best practice there, especially in a place that's already heavily commercial. It's what we want to see in our downtown area as well. So yes, that is one of the things we're looking at, and it's been kind of like what we've wanted in that area for a while, but our development codes kind of make it impossible to do the things that we want. So we're addressing some of that.
Changing it up. Yeah, no, we're kind of exploring the same thing. First floor commercial in our downtown core, and then apartments up above kind of have that old school community feel. So yeah,
Yep,
I like that a lot.
Yeah. Oh, and while I'm talking about it, we also recently, and this is also coming to the full council soon, and it came to the Land Use and Environment Committee at our last meeting. We had a presentation from staff on neighborhood centers and how, again, we have goals to have some commercial within neighborhoods and designated spots, incorporated with housing and all of that. And we've had trouble having those come about because guess what? Our development codes make it really difficult to do the things that we want to do. So that strategy is also coming forward to the full council. And we did discuss as a committee, we have our designated neighborhood centers, some of which have been successful because, well, they were developed prior to a lot of the existing zoning and the codes that we have now. But we have areas where we'd like to see neighborhood centers, but we also talked about, opportunities, to kind of open it up so that things can form more organically. There was a bill in the legislature last year that would have required all cities to allow a neighborhood cafe in any area in residential neighborhoods. And so we're talking about expanding it out even more, because you can designate a place you would like to have a neighborhood center, but if you don't have a property owner that wants to open a business there, you're not getting a neighborhood center. So how can we help support those happening more organically? So, stay tuned for more of that work to come about.
Great, thank you. Any other good to the order from anyone?
Yeah, I got something for what our, I'd like to just kind of give a shout out to our VFW post and American Legion. They've been doing a lot of work with veterans, fighting veteran homelessness and getting them the support they need, clothing, food, medical, mental health. So our VFW and American Legion share a hall right now, and we're actually looking at moving our Yelm Veteran Service Hub to a larger location because it's become such a big thing for us. And we have our another local organization called A Hero's Promise. They do equine therapy for veterans returning from war with PTSD or trying to stabilize their lives. So we got some good veteran outreach here, being right close to JBLM, of course. So just want to give them a shout out.
Great, thank you for sharing, Trevor. Carol?
Well, this is small change, but a big deal. Lacey City Council last night signed off on the MOU for the housing displacement and racially disparate impacts analysis. I was really glad to see a unanimous vote of support there. And Brian, is there anything you'd like to add that's been going on in Lacey, you or Jennifer?
Nope, I don't think so. Not since we just met a couple weeks ago. So nothing new since then.
Yeah. So, okay, that's it from Lacey. Thanks, guys.
Alrighty, well, seeing no other comments?
There's
Oh,
from-
go ahead.
I'll say, so one other thing, I just want to kind of circle back to what we did and just acknowledge that this board just approved over $17.2 million in funds going out to our community, and you did it in less than an hour. And I think that's a huge kind of reflection on the process that we've set up with the advisory boards, really doing the heavy lift. I know some folks, Joe and Kathy can attest that in past years, we've had 3-4 hour meetings to walk through kind of all the funding to kind of sort through. And so just want to kind of acknowledge a lot of the work that this board did to set up those processes with the advisory boards to make this an efficient process, but also really robust. And to get through kind of to put over $17 million in the community is just really huge. So just thanks to everybody for this new process, and it's working. So thank you.
Yeah, well said, well said.
I just want to say amen to that, Tom.
So yeah, those meetings were brutal.
Yeah, when I first came on, there was like a subcommittee to dig into
Yes,
everything. It was
financial
so much
committee.
extra time. It was intense.
I have an item, I guess, from the county. Quixote has reached out to the county with interest in the property on Carpenter Road, and we have just engaged in conversations with them about what that would look like, but we're looking at the zoning of that property really, and seeing if it's something that would fit. And we've also engaged in conversations with the city of Lacey. So we're really at the very beginning stages of just having those conversations and what to do with that property. So once we move forward in the process, there'll be more reports to come on that.
All right. Great, well, thanks, everyone. I won't keep everyone from the nice weather. So with that, I think we're adjourned.
Let's do it.
Thanks, everyone.
Nicely done, Michael.
Fourth time's charm. Let's go.